Welcome to the Now to Next podcast, where every week we provide wisdom on how to press play after a traumatic pause. If you are starting up or starting over in any area of your life or your business, subscribe and listen as we share real life stories from actual people who have pressed play and are winning after nearly losing it all. And now, your host, Octoria Robinson.
Are you ready to press play today? Let's get rocking, my friends. Join me in welcoming Ayesha Lewis. How are you, dear?
I am extremely excited.
It's so exciting, too, to have you on our show all the way from California. How is the weather?
The weather is freezing cold right now. It's actually not the sunshiny weather that everyone thinks that California is supposed to have, but it's okay. It's coming soon.
Well, we're kind of cold down here in December in Florida as well, but we're going to stay warm, and we're looking forward to hearing your story just so our listeners can connect to who the amazing Aisha is. Share a little bit about who you are.
Well, Aisha is a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a teacher, and I guess someone who just loves people and loves connecting with people in any way that God would see fit. So I'm just an all-around people's person, really down to earth, and I love to share and connect with others, especially providing hope and inspiration.
Wow. Well, you're on the right show today, because that's all our whole mission is about, helping people like me and you press play after a traumatic pause. We really get to the heartbeat of trauma, how it affects a person, how it stops a person, how it causes a person to make some life-altering decisions in the midst of a whole bunch of pain, whether it's emotionally, physically, or spiritually. Let's dive into your story. Talk to us about the last 8 years.
So the last 8 years of my life have been tumultuous, traumatic, catastrophic, for lack of a better term, if I could use those words to even describe it. On May 18th, 2010, I found out that my mother, the one who brought me into this world, had been murdered by her then boyfriend, and they actually were in a relationship for only 18 months. And so he not only did he murder her, but he then placed her body in a suitcase and then dumped her into the Embarcadero. So you can only imagine the type of heartache, pain, struggle, difficulty that the last 8 years has been. And not to mention, it took seven years before the case actually went to trial. So I actually went a good 7 years of going back and forth to court, sometimes once a month during that particular time, and then traveling from the Bay Area or the East Bay to San Francisco to attend the trial and to attend the different court proceedings. All in all, trying to wrap my mind around losing my mom, still being a mom, still being a teacher, still being a sister and a friend, and make sense of a senseless act.
My God.
It's probably the best I can describe the last 8 years.
Wow. You just took my breath away. Whew, I'm trying to gather myself. I'm thinking about, first of all, my condolences. I know that's been a while, but I want to express my condolences. I can't imagine what that felt like when you heard the news, and it's enough to lose a parent, but to lose a parent to murder, I can't imagine. Can you help our listeners understand what that felt like just for you as a daughter? Like what kind of emotions were going through your heart when you're learning, first, your mom's not here. Second, she was murdered. Third, she was discarded as though she was nothing. And we know she was not that.
How did I feel? I was broken. I was devastated. I knew that just the way that the story kind of rolled out for me, that there was something wrong, because there were 3 detectives who came to see me the morning of, and they questioned me for an hour and a half before they even said anything. And they ended up, saying afterwards that they did that because they needed to get as much information as they could from me before they, then gave me the news. And so I remember at that moment, they flipped my mom's boyfriend's picture over as they were questioning me, and I completely lost it. And for anyone who knows me, they know that I'm a person who, for the most part, I keep it together. I hold my composure. But you cannot prepare yourself for the news of losing your mom, and then so dramatic, in such a dramatic way. So I remember in that moment, them flipping the picture of him over, and I started throwing stuff. I flipped a couple of chairs over. I was screaming and hollering and yelling. I was just lost, broken, crying, distraught. Any negative, unhappy word that you can think of, I couldn't believe this was happening. I had actually seen the story about my mom the night before, but the news outlets had basically described her as a 20-year-old Hispanic woman that they had found. And so I saw the news story and then had no idea the next morning I would find out that was my mom, who was a 54-year-old African-American woman. And then shortly after me finding out, I had to then tell each one of my family members one by one, which was even more heartbreaking. I had to tell I first told my sister, and then I told my grandmother, who my mom was her only child. And then we told my brother, and then I have another baby sister who lives in Louisiana, so we called her. And it was just, just to have to sit in that and then be the bearer of bad news and deliver that news to my family. It was devastating. It was devastating. But what I can say is I remember right after I found out about my mom being killed, after I lost it, flip tape, not tables, but flipping chairs over, screaming, yelling, hollering. I do remember having enough sense, I guess you would say, to gather three of my what I call big sisters. And they were at work, and I asked them to go into a room with me, and I asked them to begin to pray with me at that moment, because I had no idea what the next moment, the next second, the next minutes, days, hours, weeks really were going to be for me and my family. But I knew that I needed to be covered. And so I remember asking them to take me into a conference room, and they began to pray, the three of them. And I just, started the journey of telling family, telling friends, dealing with media and things of that sort about what had happened to my mom.
Aisha, I'm thinking to myself, it's enough to have to grieve in private, but you had to grieve in the eye of national media, walking through this long journey, not certain what was going to be the end for the person that committed this crime against your mom. How did you maintain your sanity?
How did I maintain my sanity? One, through prayer. Sometimes I could pray for myself, and sometimes I just cried. And at those moments where all I did was cry, God would always send someone to encourage me, to pray with me, or to pray for me, or send me a message and say, I've been praying for you. And then the other one that I made it through was honestly through my family and my friends. A lot of my friends are family for me. And And so just keeping them around, kind of kept me able to move and push through. And if I didn't want to push through, I knew that I had shoulders I could cry on or say, I just need a break. I need to just take a day to not do anything. I'm not answering any calls. Can you answer my phone? So I honestly, for me, in those days after my mom was killed, was prayer and family, having loving family and friends there to support you, really was what helped me push through, along with the fact that I'm a mother. So I had, two young men looking at me and kind of giving me the motivation to move through, push through, fight a little harder, go a little stronger, move through all the pain and the heartache that we definitely have been enduring since my mom got killed.
So now, Aisha, I want to kind of deal with the elephant in the room. It's a little sensitive, but I'm sure all of our listeners are wondering, how did you deal with your emotions towards the person that took your mom's life? Because understandably, many would be okay with you hating him, like detesting him, wishing nothing but bad things to occur in his path. How did you deal with the emotion towards that person that robbed you of the next 10, 20, 30 years of a relationship and memories with your mom?
So initially I was hurt. When I first found out about my mom being killed, I was devastated. I was hurt. I just couldn't believe my mom would be in this situation. I couldn't believe that he would be the person who could do something like this. I was just in disbelief. But contrary to what many may believe, about 4 days after he was picked up by the police, I requested to go see him in jail.
Wow.
And so the week that I found out my mom was killed on a Tuesday, by Saturday of that week, I actually went to see him in jail. I didn't tell my family until the morning of, because I did not want anyone to talk me out of going to see him. And the mission for me was for me. It was all selfish, and selfish in the sense of I wanted to express to him that even though he physically took my mom from me, he could never take her memory, he could never take her spirit, he could never take her love for her children, and that I forgave him for what he did.
Wow.
And so if you can imagine, the visit was probably about an hour and a half. I'm sure they knew that I was coming to see him, so they extended some time for me to get everything and process what I needed to, because I think the visits were supposed to be 45 minutes or something like that. But I remember with my eyes filled with tears, could barely see, looking across that glass at him and like really meaning and saying to him, I forgive him. And no matter what, and I vowed to him on that day, I said, no matter what, every single time you go to court, I want you to know that I will be there. And for 7 years, all the way up until 8 years, every single time they had a court case, a court date, I was there. And that was something that it was my own it was strictly selfish, because it was all my having to deal with the healing and what I wanted to go through, as far as processing through everything, how I felt about my mom, and how I felt about just victims of crimes like this, and how a lot of times they just get kind of pushed to the side, and people don't know or don't really think about, the people that are impacted by it. And so I made it a point to make sure if nobody else was in court, that they knew that she had a family, she had children, she had people that loved her, and also to let him know, like, you thought that you were going to get away with this, but you didn't. So now, since you didn't, I have my eyes on you, and I want to make sure that you know that I'm here for my mom, no matter what. So, yes, I've forgiven him. Has it been easy? Absolutely not. It's a daily process for me. Sometimes it can be challenging to, think about how could someone do something like this. But then the flip side to it is only a person who's broken and most likely a victim themselves could actually do something like this. And so I am really in the process of working on having another conversation with him about, now that we're past the trial, it's all over, it's all said and done. Like, you need to be accountable and responsible for your actions. Say what you did and move on. Ask God to forgive you, and, you know, kind of move on with your life, is really where I'm at with him now. But as far as having any ill feelings, wanting anything bad to happen to him, absolutely not. Like I said, I forgave him, and I continue to, he's forgiven, and it is what it is. And I also had to forgive my mom, because I was upset with her as well. I had to forgive myself through the process, because I just couldn't believe, like, Mom, how could you put yourself in this predicament? Wow. And just being honest with my feelings. So I had to forgive my mom, because she didn't know that this was, in her mind, she didn't think that this could possibly happen. Or I'm sure she would have made a different choice. But, having to forgive her, and then, really forgiving myself for feeling guilty about, coulda, shoulda, woulda, and all that stuff. So hopefully that answers your question. I've forgiven him. I have no ill will towards him. I really pray that he somehow, some way, can just be responsible and accountable and live in his truth until God calls him.
Wow, you are a pillar of strength and love. I'm sure our listeners are as blessed to hear that after 4 days, you would have enough strength and resolve to find value in starting your forgiveness journey so quickly. I applaud you. Now, something hit my heart as you were speaking. I feel like a lot of times when trauma hits our lives and it's a public thing, we reflect more so on a person's end instead of their life. I want to give you a moment to just talk about who your mom was.
Wow. Now that's when I get emotional. My mom was, she was a person who would give her last to anyone. She didn't make a lot of the best choices in life, but she definitely dealt with the consequences of her choices. She was a person who lived in truth, no matter what that truth was or what that looked like. And I often talk about her being my number one cheerleader. So I always make people laugh, because the type of person my mom was if I called her and I was like, hey, Mom, look, I think today I'm getting ready to build a spaceship. And once I'm done with the spaceship, we're going to blast off into space. She'll be like, okay, well, let me get a hammer. Let's get it together. Like, I'm going to be your co-pilot. Let's go.
Wow.
So anything that I thought that I could do, she would always push me towards it. Interestingly enough, she did struggle a lot in life with drug addiction and alcoholism, but she never once encouraged me as her child to do any, or to take part in any of that, and would often really talk about how it was such a struggle for her and how people really didn't understand addiction, and they thought, why can't you just let it go, or stop drinking, or stop using the drugs. And she really talked a lot to me about the struggles that had on her, and how she absolutely, anyone who knew my mom knows that she absolutely loved her children and her grandchildren. Wow. I mean, we could do no wrong in her eyes. So she was, on May 18th, the world really lost somebody who was special, who, even in her darkest moments of being homeless at times, would still look out for other people. Still having this heart and this compassion that she did. And she loved my children to no end, to no end. And so that, that's what the world lost on May 18th. I have not been the same since she has left here. I know that for sure. I often struggle because I don't have that person who's like pushing me, like, no, you can do it. No, you really can do it. And so it's been a struggle for me in that one particular area. So I have to, really lean on God in that area to make sure, I'm trusting him and like staying faithful to what it is that he wants me to do. But as far as my mom goes, she was 100% truthful, honest, solid, compassionate, loving, everything that I think strong people describe me as is my mom.
Wow.
And I hate that people learned about her in her death. So that kind of mars who she was and her legacy. But that's why I make it a point to be an advocate for her, because she wasn't just a news story. She was my mom.
Amen.
She was my grandmother's daughter. She was my children's grandmother. She was, several people's friends, cousins. So she wasn't just, this news story that everyone thinks about.
Wow. It was really important to us as a community for you to know that we do see you, and we're grateful that you allowed us to see your mom through your words. We appreciate that. You have shared so much this morning. I'm just trying to gather my emotions because I'm thinking of what it must have felt like to be you. And even in my best imagination, I'm sure I can't even come close to your best day after losing such an incredible person. Then walking through 7, almost 8 years of your own life, your own healing, your own helping other people in your family, as well as staying true to a commitment that you made to be present every time there was a hearing. What was the hardest day of that trial?
The hardest day of the trial would have been the day that they showed the autopsy pictures of my mother. I will never forget the pain and the heartache of looking at the pictures. And we were advised to not sit in court during the autopsy pictures, but I specifically wanted to make sure for my own healing that I sat through, that I sat in everything, that I processed through day to day what was going on, my emotions, how I felt. I actually chronicled my entire time during the trial on Facebook, and kind of, shared a lot about how I felt. But I don't think you can ever be prepared for autopsy pictures, ever. And I just remember being so crying and being so hurt. One, because I'm looking at the pictures of my mom, and two, because my mom is being displayed like this. It just, it was too much, and then it wasn't private. It was all these people in the courtroom, and they're looking and they're watching. But this is my mom. So, woo, oh gosh. That was probably the hardest day of the trial for me. And then there was one other day, it was a few days before this, that was probably the second hardest day, was, and let me also add this as well. The day of the autopsy pictures, my mom's then boyfriend actually waived his appearance, so he did not even show up to court to see the autopsy pictures, and then had the audacity to show back up in the afternoon when we went into some DNA testimony. So I felt like that was a slap in my face. I definitely took that personal. But to go back to the second day, which I won't ever forget, the trial I'll never, ever forget. But a few days before that, my sister, my brother, and I were sitting in court, and they were testifying. And I remember one by one, my brother went out, and when he went out, I was like, okay, let me just sit here. But then I'm going to go check on him. So then I went out to check on him. He got him kind of together, and I couldn't really, it was too much to just take it in that moment. Mm-hmm. And so we actually left my sister in the courtroom. And I remember finally getting my brother kind of together, sitting right outside the courtroom, and my sister came storming out of the courtroom. And she began to scream. She literally walked to my face about 1.5 inches away from my face, like almost nose to nose. And she began to yell and scream directly at me. So people who were walking by thought that she was screaming and yelling at me. Of course, people ran out of court who knew my family and knew that she wasn't screaming and yelling at me. She was really directing what she wanted to say to him, to me. And so I just let her vent. And I mean, she was very upset. She was crying. She was screaming. She was yelling. And what ended up happening was the next morning when we got ready to go to court, my sister said, oh, no, I'm going to stay. You guys just go. So by the time we got on the BART to get from Berkeley to San Francisco, my sister called me and said, I'm leaving. She had already booked a flight back home to Texas, flew back home, and never came back for the trial. My God. So just to, give you kind of a context of the type of days that we went through, it was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And then to go through it without my grandmother was another thing. We had to band together as siblings because my grandmother passed away a few years ago. And so we did it together on our own.
I'm wiping tears away. My heart, and I'm sure the heart of our listeners are with you and your family, even though we know you sound to be in a different place, but the way you describe it, it's so real and it still connects like it was yesterday for you. And I appreciate you for sharing with such courage something so sacred, like all your feelings, man. I don't have words to describe my gratitude, and I'm sure our listeners are like, ask her more questions, Victoria. So it's really, really important for me before we close this interview out that you express a way that our listeners can connect with you, follow your journey, the chronicles that you put through, so how they find you on social media. All of that is going to be really important. But before we go there, I'd like for you to consider sharing something from one person to another who has walked through the tragic loss of a loved one. Like they're in day one of year one of where you were 8 years ago. Day one, year one, and they just had to talk with the detective. They're about to have a conversation with family members and so on. What would you say to them to speak strength, peace, or whatever is on your heart? What would you say to them if they were listening right now?
I would say, take your time. Take it one really hour at a time. I can't even say take it one day at a time. Take it 1 hour at a time. Don't overthink it. Just do what you can. Be in the moment. Because you won't be able to get those moments back. And prayerfully, you have a relationship with God, because I am not sure if I could have ever. No, I can't say that. I know that I could not have made it through without having a relationship with God. And so, and even in having a relationship with God, knowing sometimes I just couldn't open my mouth and say anything. Like I couldn't verbalize, dear God, listen to it, nothing, but I would cry. And, people would encourage me and tell me that he hears, those are liquid prayers and he can hear them, or he can hear what's on your heart. And just being even able to understand that he would send certain people into my life to encourage me. So I would just say, take it 1 hour at a time. Again, don't overthink it. it seems extremely hard right now, but you will get through it. Just take it moment by moment. It doesn't seem to get better. It just seems to be more easier to manage as time goes by. My mom will never come back. There will always be a space for her at the table that nobody can ever fill. My mom has missed so much. She's missed babies, graduations, master's degrees, all types of stuff. She's missed it, and we'll never get those moments back. But even in that, knowing that somehow that God is still working it out somehow is something that I kind of find, but I find humbling. I'm grateful. I'm thankful. My life could be a lot different, even, with the circumstances. I could be in a mental hospital. I could be on the side of the road somewhere. I could, anything. I could be angry at the world, mad with everyone, not hard-hearted, but I every day, and it's a struggle, but every day, sometimes are easier than others, and sometimes they're not. But every day I make it a point to really, first of all, pray for God to give me the strength to move through and to still, in the midst of all this, show love to people, show kindness to people. So, and the way that I, was able to kind of move through is forgiveness, love, and prayer. That's really my formula, my solution. That's all I have for anyone: forgiveness, love, and prayer. And excuse me, along the way, it has helped me a lot.
It sounds like it has. It sounds like it has. Now, I want us to end on a high note. What did Justice end up as after 7, almost 8 years of going through trials? Justice ended up being 25 to life. So, San Francisco is a city that does not, they don't consider the death penalty, which that's their business. And that I'm neither here nor there when it comes to that. But it was 25 to life. Wow. Well, Aisha, thank you again. Friends, I know you've been touched by what you've heard today. If you're interested in following and connecting and just observing all that God has done in Aisha's life, I'd like for you to follow her.
You can reach me at Ayesha Lewis, AyeshaLouis.com. You can follow me or request me as a friend on Facebook, Ayesha Lewis, AyeshaLouis. And also on Instagram, it's Aisha, Ayesha, _ love, LOVE, _ life, LIFE. So those are the different ways that you can reach me through social media. Keep in contact.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for being our guest today. I'm going to close because you have just blessed our audience in such an incredible way. My friends, I want you to remember this. Trauma is not the end of your story. Triumph is. Connecting with you soon is my greatest joy. I can't wait to be with you guys again. Until that time, have an exceptional day.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast today. For all things Launch Now, log on to launchnowus.com for info on products, resources, and upcoming events. We are looking forward to connecting with you and enriching your life through our next episode. And remember, you have what it takes to press play. Have a super duper epic week.